Alex, start with you. Obviously, this is going to air a lot of complaints about these platforms, how they operate, how they decide who gets to air their views and not. What does it mean for the business practices? Do you think that these companies recognize there's a potential threat to the entire business model if this leads to policy changes?
Yeah, I think they know that there's not much that's going to happen to them. I mean, if you look at the way that Americans have confidence in their institutions, the top three are the military, Amazon, and Google. Then you skip about 1,000 and you get to the political parties and Congress, and Facebook somewhere in the middle. So I think they realize there's not going to be an actual legislative action here. But I do think the threat can be meaningful. It can show them, hey, listen, if you show continued bias, there's a chance we're going to come in and change these laws. And even the fear, the very fear that can happen, will cause them to lay off some of the conservative videos that may or may not break their rules. So I think that we're not going to see any legislation. I don't think that their business practices are going to actually be affected all that much. But the fear might allow some borderline conservative videos to stay up on the platform, and that's the goal of today's summit.
Rob, you're going to be at the meeting. Is that the goal today?
I think that probably is one of the primary goals. Look, these are private companies. I don't think the government should be in the business of regulating them or trying to break them up or legislate on them. I do think, though, conservatives should band together and point out where they have seen suppression and bias against them. And frankly, let's face it, there are numerous examples, and I think that's going to be on full display today.
I mean, if the criteria, one of the issues, of course, Rob, is that the policies are reactive very often and are not necessarily clear beforehand exactly what gets taken off these platforms. So do you think there should be some rule setting down the road?
I think these companies probably need to do a better job of communicating to their users, particularly to conservatives, about their own guidelines and the terms of service which they expect people to operate. I think that's been unclear. We've experienced our own examples at the Heritage Foundation and the Daily Signal, where content has been pulled off of these platforms. It's been later restored. We even had a colleague of mine who had an apology from Twitter because he was suspended temporarily. So sometimes these companies take actions and then they backtrack on those actions. I think it leads to a lot of confusion among the users, and conservatives seem to be the ones that are oftentimes on the losing end of that.
Alex, yesterday, as we covered the Fed chair's testimony in the House, I think there was some surprise the number of questions he got about Facebook's Libra kind of crypto payment system initiative. While not really focusing on that, it did show there's a tremendous amount of interest on both sides of the political spectrum for scrutinizing everything these companies do.
That's right. It's an opportunity for people on both sides of the aisle to score points. Right now, I think the citizens of the U.S. want to see that their elected representatives are holding these very powerful companies' feet to the fire. So that means, let's make sure that they're totally critiqued and that anytime that there's an excess, they get pulled back a little bit. But remember, again, these companies are pretty popular among consumers, among people, among citizens. So it's kind of this tenuous walk for politicians where, they want to be hard, but if they're too hard, they might end up, upsetting some of their constituents. Nobody wants their, Amazon Prime to go away if they get broken up and then it takes 3 days to get your package to you, it becomes an issue for the person that broke them up. So something to keep in mind as we see these politicians grandstanding.
At the same time, Rob, we did get the news this week from a judge that, the president has a constitutional obligation not to block followers on Twitter. So obviously, at some point, everyone has to agree that there's a certain way to operate on these platforms, right?
It's going to be interesting to watch, and I look forward to hearing what the president has to say. I imagine he's going to have strong words at today's summit.